Good evening, everybody. We'll call this meeting to order. Thank you for being here. This is a council meeting that we're sitting as tonight. And if people are watching online, unfortunately, we can't make any commitment about the quality of the sound. We hope it's exceptional for you, but as you can see, we are in the arena and we've never done that before with the Zoom, so hopefully it works for you. So the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. It's moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Aragona, that the agenda for the public meeting held on April the 3rd, 2025 be adopted as presented. I'll just call that question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Any declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest tonight? Seeing none, we will get to the purpose of the meeting. Tonight, Council is holding a public meeting under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act 1997 as amended. The purpose of the meeting is to give the public an opportunity to ask questions, provide comments, and make representations on the 2024 Development Charges Background Study. This study calculates new development charges for services related to highway, policing services, parks and recreation services, advancing the slide, so that would be great. If you can go to the next slide, that would get us started. As mentioned, tonight is a mandatory requirement through the Development Charges Act to hold a formal public meeting to provide an overview of the findings of the Development Charge Background Study that was released back on December 17th. Prior to Council's consideration of a bylaw, there is a minimum 2-week circulation period of the background study before the public meeting and a minimum of 60-day circulation before Council's consideration of a bylaw. We have more than met that, as the public meeting has been delayed a couple of times until tonight. And so your Council is in excess of the circulation period required by the Development Charges Act to provide for public consideration and review. As noted, we are looking for public feedback. So if there's questions from the public this evening or following this up until the bylaw is considered by Council for passage, we'd be happy to receive and respond to those. Next slide. To give you an idea of the process undertaken to date, we started working with the village staff around last spring, summer, and into late fall to put all of the projects together and all the background, the build forecasting, everything that's required through the Development Charges Act to come up with providing Council on November 19th through a workshop with some of the background understanding of what the Development Charges Act is for, what the rules and policies are that are in place that you have to abide by, and to also give them a high level understanding at that point of some of the capital needs that the village will be faced with in the years to come as you grow. Tonight, on December 17th, as noted, we released the background study. Tonight is that formal public meeting, and
We are anticipating that council will be back on May 27th to consider passage of the first development charge bylaw, which will then become effective the following day. Next slide. So for those who are not familiar with development charges, the purpose of them is to help municipalities recover the capital costs of expanded infrastructure needed to service growth. They are, municipalities have been empowered since 1989, when the first Development Charges Act was put in place, to recover these types of costs through the development charge where possible. And what it does is then help to alleviate the impacts on the existing taxpayers to increase infrastructure that is required for growth. So trying to get growth to pay for the growth needs required. And keep those tax increases down. They are, the projects we put in here are in addition to what are considered local services. So for example, within a subdivision, a developer may be required to put in the local roads, the water and sewer mains that will service each of the houses, and some of those localized, like a parkette, developing that sort of thing. What we put in the development charges are projects that have a broader base benefit to all growth, regardless of where it is. So it's not really site specific. For the local services that are more site specific, that's still a requirement of that the developers will put in place. And eventually the village will assume those works as well and maintain and operate them and replace them going forward through property taxes. But that initial capital expenditure is the developer's responsibility versus these larger projects that will be recovered through development charges, which is imposed on properties, basically when the building permits are issued. Next slide. To give you sort of an overview of the growth forecast that has been embraced in here, there is on the population side of things for residential, in anticipation of about 450 additional people happening over 10 years to the village. That is a net population increase. However, what we see or what we're anticipating in the new units is actually higher than that, about 633 people. The difference between that net and gross population is there's a recognition that in existing units, as they age over time, they tend to have a natural decline. Children grow up and eventually move out, and there's not as many people in each of those units. So what we want to make sure we're doing is recognizing, even though there's going to be more people in those new homes, as younger families move in, there is, services in the system that will be freed up as the existing units have that decline. And the development community gets that for free, basically, with any room that is freed up in the existing system. What we are looking at is just under 270 additional residential units, and they will vary. Low density being where the majority of units are, single family homes, semi-detached homes. Medium density homes are things like row houses or townhouses. And high density would be apartments, including additional residential units that are maybe a basement apartment or a conversion of a garage into an apartment, or something such as a garden suite in the backyard. On the non-residential side of things, we are anticipating about 20 additional employees over that 10-year forecast, with the majority being in new commercial buildings. So a store could be, dentist's office, a doctor's office, something like that. It's commercial related. And then a couple of industrial and institutional. Institutional would be maybe employees in a school. They need to add additional teachers, for example. And where we're going to see that, we're estimating just over 12,000 additional square feet of new building space for those employees to be housed. Next slide. To look at the population housing, just for the forecast period, You can see that over the past 10 years, there has been around 7 or 8 units on average that has been issued, but there is an increase in what is anticipated, averaging about 27 additional units per year coming forward in the next 10 years. Next slide. As noted by the mayor earlier, there are a number of services that the Development Charges Act allows municipalities to include in the calculations if there's growth-related needs. What we have included are services related to a highway, which is all the roads and related infrastructure, including fleet and facilities that are required to maintain and those roads. Police services, parks and recreation services, library, Provincial Offences Act, including violent enforcement, and then growth-related studies, including the development charge study itself and any other studies needed to justify any of those growth-related services that are eligible have been included as a class of service. Next slide. I know this next one is small, but what this is really showing you is that in total of all of those services that have been considered, there's just under $2.5 million worth of capital expenditures anticipated over this forecast period to be put in place. Some of those costs are not eligible to be recovered through the development charge, as they may be ineligible, or a portion of the studies, for example, may be related to ineligible development charge services. Others may be a benefit to existing. So for example, if something is being replaced, but upsized or expanded, the portion that's being replaced is already there for the existing community. That's regular life cycle or asset management, we deduct that. And we're only looking at the incremental costs needed for growth. That has been deducted about $219,000 almost. And then there is some grants or other subsidies anticipated against a couple of projects, and we've deducted $25,000 for that. What that means then is there's just over $2.2 million that are going into the calculated rates that will be recovered from that residential and non-residential growth that I pointed out a couple slides ago. We do allocate those growth-related costs between the residential benefit and the non-residential benefit, with the majority of costs being related to the residential development, just over 2.1 million, and the balance being associated with that little bit of additional non-residential growth anticipated. Next slide. What that represents in calculated rates is a charge per unit on the residential side of things. So those single and semi-detached homes would have a charge of $8,695 per unit. And then as the units get smaller and there's less average people in those other smaller units, townhouses would be at just over $6,300 per unit. And then apartments, depending on the number of bedrooms in them, range between just over $5,600 to just over $4,200 per unit. On the non-residential side of things, we look at it on a per square foot basis of the building space, and that calculates to $7.28 per square foot. Next slide. And again, I know there's lots of numbers up here, so I'll try and point you to a few things, but what we've tried to do is look at in the blue line in the middle, where you are currently ranked right now. You're not imposing development charges, but there is an education charge in place, and there is a current connection charge in place. So right now, when a developer is coming forward, that they're just paying just slightly over $9,300 in total for a single family or semi-detached unit. The pink line is what we've calculated, and you will see in the first column that development charge that I've just noted. As well, there is an update to the water and wastewater connection charges that is proposed at $14,041. So you are moving up from where you currently are to that new calculated development charge and connection charge rate for a total of just over 23,000 for a single or semi-detached home. Now, how that compares to others in and around the area differs depending on a few different things. You'll see that a lot of the municipalities don't provide municipal water, wastewater services, so their charges are zero. Anyone building is required to put in a well and septic tank, and that cost is not something the municipality is required to deal with. So obviously, those municipalities are quite a bit lower on the comparison chart than those that have the municipal services. As well, there's quite a few municipalities that are still currently undergoing their development charge rates. Similar to yourselves, Leeds and the Thousand Islands are just undertaking their first ever study, and that'll be coming out later this year. As well, there are Kingston is out there with their proposed rate. They're looking to pass their new bylaw on May 20th. Their proposed and current rate are up there. And Mississippi Mills, North Grenville, who else on the list here? I look, Rockville, are all looking at, or they're all undertaking their studies right now. So where they may land will differ once their studies are completed as well. So, the comparisons are very much a moving target these days. So it's hard to really compare yourself to that because it changes daily. Next slide. Similarly, for the non-residential side of things, we've shown a slide with a comparison of what commercial rates are in place. Again, right now, you're about middle of the pack and currently would be moving up closer to the top with the full calculated development charge rate and the full new calculated connection charge. Next slide. And again, we've also shown industrial separately. And why we've shown industrial separately is there are some of the municipalities that fully or partially exempt industrial development from paying their development charges. So slightly different than the commercial side of things, where others charge all their non-residential regardless of the class that they fall into. Next slide. So there have been a lot of changes to the Development Charges Act over the last 7 or 8 years. Most recently, almost 2 per year from 2020 up until 2024, where the province has put in a lot more mandatory discounts or full exemptions for certain types of classes of development. A lot of which have been put in place to try and help provide more affordable housing and get more homes built. The industrial expansion exemption up to one time of 50% of the floor space, that's been in the act for many years. It's mandatory. So if you had a 5,000 square foot building, you could expand it by 2,500 square feet and not pay any development charges. If you wanted to expand over that 2,500 square feet, you would start paying that non-residential rate on the additional square footage over the 2,500 square feet. Residential intensification exemptions fully. If you wanted to expand your existing home, there's no charge that would be imposed on you for that. As well, the village, the county, the school boards, if they're constructing any buildings, they don't charge each other development charges. The other new things that have been added in recent years includes a full exemption for additional residential units up to 2 more units. And that is for an existing home that's adding 2 units or a new build that is coming forward. And at the time they're coming for their building permit for that new single family home, they could apply at the same time to have a basement apartment and a garden suite in the backyard. And the village would only be able to impose a charge on the first single family home. The other 2 units would not have the charge imposed on them. For affordable units or attainable units, they are also fully exempt. The ministry has put out last year a threshold for what is considered affordable for both ownership units and rental units by different types. If anything is sold below those thresholds, the development charge cannot be imposed. Attainable units, although the Development Charges Act fully exempts them right now, they haven't been fully defined yet by the province. We're waiting on regulation. All we know is that an attainable unit is not a rental unit and it's not an affordable unit. But what it is, there's nothing measurable right now for the staff to measure against to determine if a unit is considered attainable for that exemption. But at any time, the province could come in, put that definition in place, and if a unit then falls within that defined term of what an attainable unit is, it will also be fully exempt from development charges. Nonprofit housing is also exempt, and any affordable units that are in inclusionary zone bylaws, which the village does not have at this point, but at some point may decide to in the years to come. Universities that receive ongoing funding from the province would be exempt fully. And rental housing, there is a discount. Now, rental housing is defined as a development that has 4 or more units, all of which are for rental purposes. If a development meets that criteria, then depending on the number of bedrooms in each unit, there's a discount. So if there is 3 or more units or 3 or more bedrooms in the unit, they get a 25% discount off the calculated rates for those different types of units. If there's 2 bedrooms, they get a 20% discount. And if it's a 1-bedroom or bachelor unit, it gets a 15% discount. There's also rate freezes in place for developments that proceed through site plan agreement or zone rezoning applications, where the rate that is in becomes effective is the rate that was in effect the day the application came in. So if I came in today and applied, the rate is 0 because there is no development charge. I then have 18 months to pull my building permit from the date that the municipality, the village actually approves my application, and I don't pay a development charge. So if I came in today and applied and they went through their review of my site plan application and I got approval a month from now, from that point forward, a month from now, 18 months, I have to pull my building permit and I pay 0. For applications for site plan or rezoning that came in before June 6th of 2024, that 18-month window between approval and building permit application is actually 2 full years. So it has been reduced for any applications that didn't receive approval before June 6, 2024. And that's something staff will have to consider when every permit comes forward that proceeded through those. So there are developments over the next year or so that will still not have these charges imposed on for the development charges. And then if there is a rental housing or any type of institutional development, they no longer pay development charges like everyone else at the time of building permit issuance. Their charges are paid in 6 equal annual installments starting at the first date of occupancy, not building permit issuance. And then every year for the next 5 years on the anniversary of that occupancy, they pay another installment. And for both the rate freeze and the installment, you can impose a maximum interest rate that has been prescribed to any outstanding amounts. Those are all statutory requirements that your hands are tied as council. You have to provide those discounts or full exemptions. And what that means is of that 2.1 million and change that was growth related dollars, at the end of the 10-year period, when all that growth is in place, you won't have collected enough, which means anything related to those discounts or exemptions, there is still funding when you go forward with those capital projects that will be needed to come from property taxes or other sources. Hopefully, the province makes some, or the feds make some grant funding available to help make up the difference so that it's not hitting the taxpayer. On top of that, every municipality has the ability to put in additional discretionary exemptions. If there's any type of development or class of development that they want to incentivize. A type of development may be a place of worship. A class of development might be industrial. And as long as you treat every development in that type of class the same, this council has the ability to provide additional discretionary exemptions. At this point, because it's the first bylaw and because of the amount of statutory exemptions and discounts that you're forced to have, we haven't recommended any discretionary exemptions. The council has the ability to add that between now and when they consider the bylaw if they want to. The one thing we have included in there in the recommendation is a redevelopment or conversion credit. That doesn't mean you're out of funding. So if I'm knocking down a single family home and I'm going to replace it with a semi-detached home. So now I'm going from 1 unit to 2 units. I would get an exemption for the first unit because it's just really replacing what was already there. Now I have to do that within a certain time period. But that's the only sort of discretionary policy that we're putting in place. And although that's not statutorily required by the Development Charges Act, I have not seen a bylaw in Ontario without some type of redevelopment or conversion credit offered. Next slide. So next steps, obviously we are here tonight to receive public comment. We did receive a written submission from a development that a response has been provided to their questions. Again, as mentioned, we're planning on being back on May 27th for consideration of bylaw passage with the effective date anticipated for the following day. There is a notice of bylaw passage required by the Act that has to be put out within 20 days of bylaw passage, and anyone can appeal the bylaw to the Ontario Land Tribunal within 40 days of bylaw passage. If there is no appeals, then within 60 days of bylaw passage, staff have to provide on the website and in at your counters for anyone that comes in a pamphlet that really just kind of highlights all of the current rates and policies that are in place for the bylaw, so that it's a little bit more understanding than trying to read a legislative bylaw. It highlights things to give you the more specific of what we've gone over tonight as to what exemptions and discounts are and some of the other policies that are contained in that bylaw. And that is my presentation of the overview. The background study has been posted on the village's website since December 17th. It is a fairly thick and detailed report. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Your presentation to council is also, the video is also on our website. So people could get it was a lengthy, it was about an hour and change, but you went through many slides and many situations. So that's available to people as well. So any members of the public, hi John, any members of the public have questions, please stand, state your name and then your questions so that Nancy knows who you are.
Hi, Peggy Thompson, from Westport. So how does the watercolor development then fit in with development charges? I remember watching the meeting where this was discussed ages ago, and my understanding was that because the development charge isn't in place now, we cannot go back to watercolor and recover that. Is that correct?
That's correct. You cannot do anything retroactive.
Now, okay, so what about the new applications that watercolor has put in for consideration? Can we, because that application is already in, and the development charges aren't effective yet, can we apply those development charges to that application?
It depends on the type of application. If the application is a site plan or a zoning, or a rezoning application, then the rates would have been frozen, currently at 0, on that development. And then depending on when those applications were or are to be approved, that either 18 months or 2 years timeframe, that clock starts ticking. And depending on when the building permits are pulled, then will depend on whether you can impose the charge or not. So again, if they've applied and received their approval recently, they have 18 months from that day they receive their approval to pull their building permits. If they do that within the 18 months, the village cannot impose a development charge on them. If there's units that have building permits being issued after that 18-month period, those would be subject to the charge.
So for my benefit, the meeting that we had a month ago, for that section.
So the
that
meeting
they
we
are
had a
applying
month
for.
ago was for a zoning bylaw amendment unrelated to this.
Okay. So that's separate from this.
It's a separate
Okay,
process.
totally separate. So then, again, just trying to clarify my understanding. Again, during that meeting, when you were making your presentation, was also, I think, talking about a new truck. For instance, the snowplow and that sort of thing, that would have gone. A portion of it could have gone and been considered for growth. But again, because development charges aren't in place, we can't offset any cost of the truck at this point.
So
Is that
you
correct?
go ahead and answer that because you know where we're at with our process.
Yeah, so there, again, depending on where an application is in the process or not, will depend on whether a development charge can be imposed. That truck, as well as other projects that you'll find in the background study on chapter 5 for each service, they're detailed. That is a project that's in the development charge calculations. Now, if some developments, because of statutory exemptions or discounts, don't pay fully or at all, that amount then has to be funded from other sources. But there will be, keep in mind, we're collecting over a 10-year forecast period here. So there will be eventually developments that will pay the development charge. So a portion of that vehicle or any of the other projects will eventually be funded through the recoveries of development charge revenues. But you'll never get 100%.
Right, I
Because
understand.
of the statutory exemptions and discounts.
And we also need to remind people that we currently collect for water, which is not 8,500-ish. I'm in the right ballpark there.
It is.
You can remember better than I do.
Yeah, and actually, there's another presentation coming
Yeah,
out after the
but
public
just-
meeting about those connection charges for water, wastewater, and the updated rates for that. So that'll be
They're
coming.
kind of restricted for certain.
Well, so just let me finish. So we're already collecting with each building permit around $8,500. That won't change. That will move in the future. That is for water, wastewater expansion for sure. So we're clear on that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's just want to remind people that we are collecting in that.
And one last question, sorry. When this act came in 1989?
The initial act was passed in 1989. It has been, it had a major overhaul in 1997, which is this act we're still working with now, the 1997 act. However, there's been 10 different changes since that time, amendments to the act since 1990.